Hi all, welcome back to Bilingual Tutorial. Today we are discussing the lesson Lullaby written by Leslie Marmon Silko. The oral tradition of Native American is portrayed through the central character or the protagonist, Ayah. Ayah's life itself is an example for the exploitation the natives face by the interference of white people into their life. So before moving to Ayah's stories, we can see who is the writer and something about writer can be discussed. Leslie Marmon Silko. She was born in 1948 to a family whose ancestry includes Mexican, Laguna Indian and European forebears. She has said that her writing has at its core the attempt to identify what it is to be a half-breed or mixed-blood person. As she grew up on the outskirts of Laguna Pueblo Reservation in New Mexico, USA, she absorbed the stories and culture of Laguna people from her grandmother and other female relatives. After completing an undergraduate degree in English at the University of Mexico, she enrolled to study law, but completed only 3 semesters. She decided that writing and storytelling is the best means for her to promote justice. Her important works include a series of short stories including The Man to Send Rain Clouds, for which she won National Endowment for the Humanities Discovery Grant. And another one, she authored a volume of poetry, Laguna Woman Poems, in 1974, which received the Pushcart Prize for Poetry. Then her more celebrated novel, Ceremony, in 1977. In 1981, Silko received a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship and published Storyteller, a collection of poems, tribal stories, fiction and photographs. Silko is also well known for her friendship with the poet James Wright, and this correspondence was chronicled in the book The Delicacy and Strength of Lace, Letters between Leslie Marmon Silko and James Wright, published in 1986. And this won Boston Globe Book Prize for non-fiction. Silko's second novel, Almanac of the Dead, published in 1991, and this explores themes similar to those found in Ceremony through the lives of 2 Native American women. While discussing the historical background of the story Lullaby, we have to discuss Native American Renaissance. Just after Vietnam War between 1963 and 75, there was an emergence of critics, and that critics give birth to some writers, some native writers. So some native right protection group, they protest publicly demanding civil rights of Native American people. This increased public consciousness about the plight of Native Americans, and it set stage for Native American Renaissance. Native authors started writing about the cultural barriers and the torturings they faced. And that was the first wave writers in Native American Renaissance. The first wave writers were characterized by the poems and essays that described and reclaims Native American rituals, beliefs and traditions. Some works take inspiration from traditional Native American stories through oral tradition or tribal sovereignty or self-rule. Silko is considered to be the first wave writers of Native American Renaissance. Okay, then it is the summary of this lesson, Lullaby. Summary of the story, Lullaby. The story begins with the explanation of Ayah, the central character. Ayah, an elderly Native American woman, she wraps herself in an old army blanket and watches the snowfall. She waits for her husband Chato outside a bar. And that snowfall reminds her childhood, the life she spent with her mother and grandmother. She compares this snow with the new wool. The snow came down like thick tufts of new wool washed before the weaver spins it. She remembered how she learned weaving and watched her grandmother and mother making beautiful colored blankets using natural dye. The blanket Ayah wears now was a gift from her son Jimmie. Ayah remembers the day she has given birth to Jimmie. Jimmie was the eldest son of Ayah, and he was named for the summer morning, and they called him Jimmie in English. Jimmie used to help Ayah in everything, and he joined army. And there he died in a helicopter accident during the war. One day, a man came to their home in a blue sedan with white writing and wearing khaki uniform trimmed with gold. And he gave them a yellow piece of paper and he said something in English to Chato. The man got surprised to hear Chato's response. Chato said that they did not want the dead body back. Chato used the language of death to Ayah. Jimmie isn't coming home anymore. This was the dialogue he just told to Ayah, explaining their son's death. Ayah could not believe that Jimmie was dead. It was hard for her to accept his death, and that's why whenever Jimmie's thought comes to her mind, she used to think something else. And she believed that what Chato has told is right. Jimmie just would not come back home. Ayah mourned for Jimmie for years, especially when Chato broke his leg when he fell off from a horse. Jimmie could have worked for the rancher in Chato's place and helped her. Instead, they had to go without Chato's pay until he could work again. Ayah was still mourning for Jimmie when the white doctors came to the house for Danny, her younger son, and Ella, her daughter. Ayah does not know any English, but Chato taught her to sign her name. So she signed the papers the doctors put in front of her. She just wanted them to go away from them, but they stayed. That's when she realized that they meant to take Danny and Ella with them. Ayah grabbed the children and ran into the foothills, where they stayed until Chato came home. The doctors returned the next day with a Bureau of Indian Affairs policeman. Chato explained to Ayah that the doctor suspected Danny and Ella had caught a disease from their grandmother who had died a few months before. Ayah was not ready to believe this. She says, "The whites are lying." And she asked for a medicine man, but it was too late. She had already signed the papers and it is with the white doctors. Thus, Danny and Ella were taken to Colorado, and it was worse than if they had died. That is the narrator's words about Danny and Ella's departure from Ayah. Ayah hated Chato for teaching her how to sign her name. Just like the elders had told her, learning English was dangerous, or learning white man's language or their rainy ways was dangerous. And she stayed alone on the hill for months and slept under Jimmie's army blanket. And she finally moved back into their shack when the snow came. But it took years for her to lie next to Chato again. By that time, he was sick and unable to walk. The rancher had analyzed Chato is becoming weak and he couldn't work, so he evicted them. That had satisfied her. This is the words narrator has told about the incident. Ayah has been waiting for Chato for a long time, but he still hasn't come out of the bar. He spends most of their government check there every time when they reach Ceboleta. And Ayah decided to get into the bar and get him herself. She goes into the bar knowing that the owner does not like Native Americans to enter the bar. But this time owner does not put any fuss, and the room quiets upon her entrance. She feels that the men were afraid of her and they watch her just like she was a spider woman crawling across the room. Ayah reminded of the first day Danny and Ella came back to the little shack. Their chaper one, a bold white woman, was frightened by the meat drying in the open and by the unfamiliar language spoken in the shack. And the last time when they visited, Ella does not remember her mother, and Danny started to forget his language, Navajo. He is speaking English. And Ayah leaves the bar and walks down the road looking for Chato. They come to town on 1st of every month to collect their check from the government, which Chato cashes at the bar. They go home when the money and the wine run out. Home is the hogan, that is a small stone shelter built of earth and timber. And this hogan where Ayah was born, that's their home now. And they have sheep and a garden there. But because of drought, they have mainly been living on the boxes of rice and sugar and big tin cans of welfare peaches supplied by the government for the past 5 years. Ayah can see Chato up ahead. He moves slowly enough and forgets things including Ayah's name. She guides him to some large boulders which they use to block the wind as they wrap themselves in Jimmie's blanket. Ayah watches the storm pass to reveal the night sky. The icy stillness from the edge of the thin moon descend upon them, covering everything in an icy crust. She tucks the blanket around an almost sleeping Chato, and she can understand the chilling effect from his body. So she starts singing a song about Mother Earth, the Father Sky, and her mother and grandmother used to sing this lullaby to her, but she never sung such a lullaby to her children. And the story ends with the line, "We are together always. There never was a time when this was not so." And through this line, Ayah explains the death of Chato. Here ends the story. Thank you for listening, and its Malayalam explanation will